Good evening and good morning, as the case may be. Welcome. Welcome to each one of you. My name is Sarah Gilliatt. I am a semi-retired goat farmer from New Hampshire, and I volunteer with the Northeast Organic Farming Association, a member organization of the National Family Farm Coalition. First, I want to thank you all so much for taking time to be here today. The turnout is truly inspiring. By way of a short intro, a group of us from NFFC's Fair Prices Committee was eager to hear from our European counterparts to learn how they have centered the issue of fair prices to farmers in their policy proposals. To us, farmers getting paid fairly for their hard work lies at the heart of the deep systemic change that is needed to not only achieve profitability, but to farm agroecologically, to have a good quality of life, and to have resilient, vibrant rural communities and economies. Leaving everything to the so-called free market, which has never really existed, is, in effect, handing over much that we love to mega profiteers. We hope that farmers here in the US of different scales and political stripes will unite against a system which is hurting farmers and non-farmers alike. As farmers, we must continually hone our skills at stewarding life, regenerating soils, improving water cycles, building biodiversity, and more. As practical people who innovate and provide for our communities, we are trusted messengers, and this gives us so much power. With that power and the knowledge that agricultural policies are human-written rules, together we can work to rewrite those rules for life-affirming purposes. In that spirit, I turn this over to our esteemed moderator, Raj Patel, ally, author, filmmaker, and professor at the University of Texas, Austin. Thank you, Raj.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you again all for being here. I'm going to keep my remarks pretty short because the reason we're here is to unpick the conundrum of how it is that the record has been distorted of farmers' protests in Europe. Sitting here in the United States, if the media ever covers these protests, they're being represented as something rather different from the farmers' protests in India, which in India, they seemed to be militantly anti-government and for the people. But the coverage that we're seeing in the United States of farmer protests seems to be of farmers allying with the far right, with farmers being very reactionary and anti-environmental. And these representations of European farmers couldn't be further from the truth. We're here to set that record straight and to understand the terrain of organizing and struggle for European farmers, particularly sustainable small family farmers with a vision for agroecological production that can sustain Europe through the climate crisis and through this resurgence of the far right. So I'm very pleased to introduce three incredible speakers. I'm going to introduce them now, and then I'm going to just lay the ground rules for how we're going to interact. So going first will be Javier Sánchez. Javier is an organic dry land farmer growing wheat, barley, peas, and vetches in Spain, along with a small orchard. He is an active participant in the Union of Farmers and Ranchers in the region of Aragon, which is part of the coordination of farmers and ranchers organizations. Javier is also active within the European coordination of La Via Campesina and is part of the International Coordinating Committee of La Via Campesina. Currently, he is a member of the La Via Campesina Working Group on public policies related to the decade of family farming. Next up, we will have Florent Sebban. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Florent. Florent is an organic farmer near Paris, France. He and his partner, Sylvie, founded their farm, La Ferme Sapousse, 12 years ago, on town-owned land, and they produce vegetables, fruits, herbs, and honey. And everything they produce is sold through a French-style community-supported agriculture initiative, a CSA, and it's called AMAP, the Association for the Maintenance of Peasant Agriculture. Florent is a spokesperson of the French CSA movement MIRAMAP, the interregional movement of AMAP. And then finally today, we'll hear from Mathieu Corgeau. Mathieu is a dairy farmer in the west of France, and he's been involved in the French Farmers Union, the La Confédération Paysanne, for 10 years. And his particular focus has been the European Common Agricultural Policy reform process. And he is also the co-president of Collectif Nourrir, a French collective of civil society and farmers' organizations aimed at implementing fair, democratic, and ecological agricultural food policies. So what we're going to do is have everyone talk for 15 minutes. My job today is to sort of run the clock. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to replace my face with this. And everyone gets 15 minutes. I've also been told that occasionally, and we know this from our comrades, members of La Via Campesina need reminding of time limits. So at 10 minutes, you will hear just a very friendly chicken nudging you to conclude your remarks. At 15 minutes, we're getting a little bigger. That is your sign that 15 minutes is up. And then if things go very bad, it is the donkey of doom. So let's not hear the donkey. Let us respect our 15 minutes of fame each. And I'm very excited, first of all, to hand it over to Javier. Javier, the floor is yours, and your 15 minutes begin now.
Thank you so much, moderator. It's a pleasure for me to be able to share this dialogue, and let's hope that this dialogue can continue strengthening all of our struggles. A small analysis of what our situation was and all the motives that this wave of mobilization, of agricultural mobilizations that have shaken many countries in the European Union, principally Germany, France, Belgium, Romania, Spain, and others. It's true that it's not easy to make comparisons, to unite all the common difficulties that we face from the existing system in familiar agriculture, which is being massacred by the policies of the European Union and the great international corporations. Just a quick piece of information that in the last 19 years, 1 million European agricultural farmlands have been eliminated. This is 800 farmlands per day, and they continue to diffuse public funds illegally, and about 20% of that ends up in the large agricultural businesses. And we know that this favors international agribusiness and not local production. Instead of fortifying and strengthening our local production, this is something that we defend, which is food sovereignty. The European Union is one of the greatest producers of grains. Especially here in my country, Spain, and we are also one of the greatest exporters of transformed products, and this has multiplied in the last 20 years. And every day, our social and familiar model, we are confronting that control over the international distribution, and we're also threatened daily by the investment funds that are sacking our territory and have been using the flag of the decarbonization and the renewable energy, which counts with complete impunity, which has been sacking our territory. And this is one of the struggles that we face. And in that sense, every day we are struggling with the rentability of our production, and also making sure that our message gets across in these mobilizations, in which in an active sense, our organizations in La Via Campesina, together with Via Campesina in Brussels, we have been asking for the policy of international commerce to be eliminated, such as Mercosur, the accords with Chile, Mexico, India, Kenya, Australia, and even with Canada. It continues to be applied without being ratified, ignoring all of the democratic norms. Surely the rest of you will also be speaking of the common policies which have brought a greater instability for the familiar model, with again the excuse of the decarbonization of the economy, which is more like a greener pack, but it's more of a greenwashing, what is called greenwashing of the neoliberal policies. And we need funds that are distributed more fairly for the workers of the land and the producers of cattle. And it's important that we dignify the people who are working. And another point is that in each reform of the PAC, it says that they will simplify the amount of administrative work, but what we see is quite the contrary. They're always multiplying the bureaucracy, and they are forcing a digital transformation in which only 14% of the agrarian property has more than 55%, 55 years of existence. And so it is a very old system. And this is the situation of our context, in which several factors of instability have come up, of a crisis, of and a situation of rage, which is very similar to the droughts that have happened in several zones, and to a situation of the militarization of the economy. We know that it's not a phenomenon that is strictly of the European Union, but it is affecting us greatly, because it has come after the entire impact of COVID, which has meant a great and significant increment in the costs of production. And this increase in the and rise in the cost of production has only worsened our situation. And it's precisely in these mobilizations, which has been one of the fundamental axes, the reform, the PAC reform, the bureaucracy, the war, the production costs, and the prices of the products. And so what has happened in the European Union? We've seen how there have been mobilizations every year, but having so much information and so many media outlets being involved, because they started in Germany and then they continued in France, and then at the end of January we saw a brutal campaign very well orchestrated and managed and financed by industries from different points of Spain, agricultural industries, financing social media campaigns that through WhatsApp. They produced a network of like 500 networks through WhatsApp in all of the cities and towns of the Spanish state, copying some of the messages, so like prices, like competition with the importations and with the environmental norms, the like the great stigma, which was the 2030 agenda, and capturing the attention of thousands of youths that are no longer within the historic logic of the construction of agrarian organizations, of people's assemblies, but now they are only working through what they receive through WhatsApp and through social media. And now we've seen how that social media campaign have absorbed the attention and even provoked an attack against our organizations, and an incredible attack of personal insults, of attacking reputations, of us not being able to achieve anything. And they've been studying the strategies very well, even though we used to call them spontaneous platforms that were called to rebellion. But what they were really hiding was to place themselves in the scenario a few months before the European elections. And this has been the strategy over the last months, in which many media outlets and the press in general have contributed greatly to that effect, to the mobilization of people that are filled with detractors in WhatsApp and the different social media platforms, in which us in the agrarian organizations all over the European Union, we've been having our calendars of mobilizations, and that are also coordinated through Via Campesina Europa, which has to do with the regulation of the markets and the prices and the production process. But all of our messages have been copied, and in this Spanish state, we've been mobilizing not only on a state level, but also participating in the mobilizations in Brussels, as well as in our individual regions. And so we sometimes have very tense situations with these superstructures, and we've been tolerating all of these strategies, but we've been able to maintain our coherence. And after these months and after the European elections, where the entire objective that the ultra right wing has had, and has had a great impact in different countries. In Spain, they've maintained these positions in the ultra right, the far right. But it's important that there's opposition to this far right in the parliament, since they are pushing against a more sustainable social model. But it's important in these last minutes of mine to define how in the Spanish state we managed to get a law of food chains, which we are now working with Brussels to prevent the tactics of large scale distribution, and to ensure that we can have prices under our production costs. There's very few places on earth that have this law. And so what's important is for it to be applied. And so in Brussels, we continue to push for there to be an observatory of prices, to see what prices are being implemented in the European Union, to ensure that it's rentable and sustainable. And it's important for the youth to make their decision to incorporate themselves into this struggle and this industry, and because they see it very pessimistically. And this is a very important struggle in which we are sharing with different regions of Via Campesina Europe. And we believe that the observation of these prices is very important. I believe this concretely, that the prices of cereals and grains because of the industry that regulates the production of pork in the Spanish state. The importation of cereals and grains from Ukraine has provoked that we have a 30 or 40% decrease in prices, while our production costs continue to increase. And so that's why we continue to implement this line of critical, and we've been doing this in the FAO as well, in the World Food. And where we're working with all our comrades from Via Campesina Internacional, as you well know. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Javier, for that very enlightening and worrying overview of the dangers that farmer organizations are facing from the far right in Europe, and for your brave work in pushing back against that. And we'll be talking after everyone else has spoken together about what the prospects are for a more sustainable and just food sovereignty vision in Europe. But thank you for setting the stage for us so beautifully and for sticking to time, Javier. Next up is Florent. Florent, I wonder if you might be ready to take your 15 minutes and take us away. Thank you so much.
Hi, can you hear me properly?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. It is very interesting for us to have this webinar, and especially to have Javier's view just before, because in fact we're discussing a little bit among European colleagues, but not enough, and we're really facing the same situations. So I'll tell you what happened in France over the last month on the farmers' protest, and you'll see similarities with what Javier said. Of course, it did start in Germany, and while it started in Germany, many of the French unions were looking at it and were wondering whether it will be imported in France. And it started in France, in the south of France, with the wine producers who are facing very difficult conditions with climate change. They have to get some of their trees out, and they have very low price because of international competition. And so there were real anger there. There were anger also in dairy and meat producers, more in the center of France, and then it came to the rest of the country. And basically all of the farmers were touched by these protests. It started in January, February, and lasted until March. Basically, farmers were on roundabouts, were on highways, and they were organized. And the population and the media were basically, most of the media were constantly talking about agriculture. So in a way, it was interesting to have some kind of debate, some kind of public discussions on agriculture. We never had that, and all families, all people in bars were talking about this, and that was an interesting moment. What we felt was that there was a general unhappiness among farmers, and I think we small farmers in community-supported agriculture also faced that unhappiness with two main problems, which were shared among the different farmers. One is an income problem, and another one is a problem with free trade agreements. And these two problems are often linked. But if we we usually don't talk to all farmers. We talk to some that are similar to us, but those that are very different, we don't talk to them because they're in different circles. And here during these protests, we did talk to them. What I found very interesting is that we had something in common. We shared this demand for a stable income, and especially while some new demands from the society arrive on farming, to adapt the farming models to environmental demand in the society. What I did understand during these protests is that even my colleagues who are not doing organic agriculture, who are doing sport agriculture with loads of machinery and intensive capital farms, they would be in a position to change their model if the income was stabilized, and if basically the society was paying the price for environmental transition in the farms. And so this feeling, we had it on the roundabouts, talking to farmers, that there was a huge problem of income, but if we would set the income problem, we could probably go to a huge change in in our agricultural system. And therefore, what came after is the main union, which is basically dominated by cereal producers, grain producers, and we are in the Paris region. Basically,
Pardon, Florent, sorry, could you go just a little bit slower? The interpreters are struggling to keep up with your fantastic analysis. If we go just a little slower, please.
Yes. Well, what we saw basically, these two demands, problem of income and problem with the free trade agreements. Then the discussion was enlarged, and especially because the cereal producers, the grain producers, who are neighbors of us in the Beauce region, which is close to Paris, they came in the movement because they felt that their big union, which has the majority in the union election, was out of the loop, and so they wanted to be in the movement, and they came with loads of organization, and they imposed demands on lowering environmental regulation. So basically, we had people demanding an income, and not really opposed to respecting environmental regulation. And here you had the big farms, the cereal producers, who entered in the movement and said, the solution, yes, we can try and ensure an income for everybody, but if we lower environmental regulation, then it will be easier to produce. And for us, this was a real breakthrough in the movement, because here this union is very the government really listened a lot to this movement, to this union, and it was way easier for the government to accept this demand to lower environmental regulation than to put into question the free trade agreements, or to be a bit more innovative to ensure an income for each farmer who is eager to transform agroecologically his or her farm. And so based on that, we had a wedding, a union between this big farmers union, FNSEA in France, and the government, a team, and they had a common agenda to lower environmental regulation on pesticides, on hedgerow, on democratic use of water, on regulation on animal breeding, basically on all these where there are huge demands from the general public for a farming system which is much more coherent with environmental demands. The response from the government, advised by this union, was to say, okay, we will make sure that your life is easier, you farmer, not by giving you safety and ensuring your income in order to respect environmental regulation, but by lowering environmental regulation. And this came at the moment where the government was preparing a law on agriculture, and therefore all these new measures to lower environmental regulation were integrated in the law to basically have less regulation pressure on farmers. But nothing in that law was integrated on
Florent, we've lost you. We can hear you now. You're back.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So what I was saying is that in that law, the demands from that big union to lower environmental regulations were integrated, but nothing was integrated on ensuring a fair income for farmers, which was the main demand. And of course, nothing was integrated on free trading agreements. And worst, and I think Mathieu will talk about that a bit later, the government and the president said, I will defend you, farmer, by going at European level, talking to the president of the European Commission, so that she also makes sure that the EU environmental regulation is being lowered on several issues. So there was an attempt from the government to change national law and go at European level in order to make sure that environmental regulation is lowered. But the same thing, there was nothing promoted at European level to ensure a fair income for farmers. Our interpretation is that it created this process created huge frustration among farmers, because it was extremely difficult for them to go and demonstrate during days and nights. Some were not on their farm for 1, 2, even 3 weeks on highways, on roundabouts, and basically they achieved almost nothing. And the big union said, it's fine, we should stop demonstrating. So what we feel is that there's still an enormous amount of frustration among farmers. And as Javier said, for Spain, the same happened in France. This frustration is being welcomed by the far-right party, which previously they were really anti-migrants, but on environmental issues, they could promote local agriculture, while now, for the last year or so, they made a huge change, and they're completely aligned with agro-business, and they're demanding all environmental regulation to be lowered. And they're really going to farmers from farm to farm. They're calling. We just learned that they're calling farmers in order to show them that they will lower environmental regulation in their name. And the problem is that we now entered. As Javier said, there were European election, and in our country, our was extremely high, and we're in a situation where now we have a national general election in 3 days, and far right is extremely high, and they might even be prime minister with a majority in the parliament, and their agenda on agriculture is really contradictory to what we promote in Via Campesina, in the AMAP, and in Urgency on national family farming. Basically, they've got an agenda which is aligned with agro industry, which is export-oriented agriculture, and not at all organic. I think we still have some hopes, because during that process, media, as I said at the beginning, really talked a lot about agriculture, and there were different polls, and many people living in our country have increased their knowledge on what's happening in farms. And especially, many people did realize that there was an income problem, and that it was very difficult to actually expect from farmers to change environmentally without having the society to pay for that environmental cost. So we understand that even though politically it is very difficult what we're living and experiencing at the moment, we have real hopes because we feel that the society is ready to imagine new modalities to associate farmers and to finance farming that is delivering food, but that is also delivering many environmental services, depolluting water, depolluting air, playing on landscapes, and also creating jobs locally in societies that are moving and that have less jobs in the third sector and more in the farming sector. So that is really one of our hopes. And our systems in the community supported agriculture, in the AMAP system, has also proved that in a crisis like that, we are not depending on public subsidies. We're depending on people that are paying the entire harvest, and we're delivering them one part of the harvest every week, and they're maintaining our income, and our income is fixed for the whole year. And we're actually proving that with this income, which is maintained by people that have subscribed an abonnement with our farm, we can spend time doing agroecological infrastructure on the farm and transforming the farm. So what we feel is that there's loads of public awareness to be done, but we have models that should be promoted. And the key question again is the income. So the key question is the income allows environmental change. So how do we put in place income innovative ways to maintain incomes? And one innovative way, which is discussed among the AMAP movement, the Confédération Paysanne, which Mathieu will talk about a bit later, is to put in place a food social security system in which basically every family, rich and poor, will contribute to a common system, and they will get a right to buy food with this system, buy food to their local producers next to them. And the aim of such a system is there are two aims, two goals. Make sure that each and every individual and family has the possibility to get food sovereignty by buying good quality food next to them, and make sure that there's a demand for this good food, and therefore the demand means an income for farmers. So that's one of the proposals which we're trying to push, and which we're hoping if there's another government, we're getting that converted.
What perfect timing, Florent. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the depth of that analysis. I know you can't see the chat on your phone, but you're getting a lot of very positive feedback where people are very excited about your analysis. And I'm excited for us to have the conversation about that, and to have a little time for the three of you to have a conversation together to find these commonalities. But before we do that, I'd like to turn to the last of our speakers today, Mathieu. Mathieu, your 15 minutes starts now, and take it away.
So hello, everybody. I am located in the west of France. And if we want to go back to mobilization of agriculture, there is a question in the chat that I saw that in 2019, where there was a protest that was very important following some political decision talking about cattle ranching. And those protests, we saw them also in Germany, and then after that in Spain, in Greece, and in France. So we see that there's a lot of mobilization in agriculture in Europe. And we can see that it really reflects the crisis that we see and the schizophrenia that we see that the government has facing agriculture, and how we see that agroeconomy and agrocorporation are the ones that are taken over. And when we come back on the subject, we could see that it was a group of protest with different subject and with demands that are different too. But we can see that a lot of the agriculture that protested in France in the Southwest, we had a lot of and we can see that there was a lot of worries about um, environmental change and climate. And there was also a protest with the movement, with the awareness of um, organic agriculture, because we can see that it's in a crisis right now. The installation, the model that is used for agriculture. If I try to make a caricature of the whole thing, there were like 3 different type of protests that were going on at the same time. If it's those products and the diversity that you see in the agricultural world, we see that here in Europe, the smaller farmers and then the big agro economy, and we can see that the gap is getting larger between the different type of agriculture, and it is really much more um, in Europe than other places. And we know that as Javier and Florent said, they maintain this type of inequality. You will have somebody that if they have a big farm, the bigger it is, the harder it is for the smaller agriculture, because they end up with almost nothing. And because you know that the big agriculture, the big farmers has thousands of acres, but the smaller one don't. Another point is the gap in the differences of revenues. We can see that the bigger farmers are and we know that about 15% of smaller farmers are living below poverty. And with the COVID crisis, we had a hike in electricity and fuel and the price for products. And this is part of the protest that we have, because the price that were put in place during agriculture is, and the worst thing is the production cost. And another element that I find is really important, and that some of my colleague has pointed out, is that the price and the prices can be really low, and then other time they will be extremely high. There's a certain instability, and it is really difficult for us farmers to be able to work in conditions like this with prices that are not stable. I'll take my example. I am a milk producer. Today we heard that the price went up slightly from 2 to 3 years, and this really puts us in a very difficult situation. And so the protests that we have on prices, it's in order to share it more equitably and balance it with the big industries. And we know this has been part of the fight, the historical fight. So this is the first point that I would like to make. And the second point is to regulate the market, because we are on a unilateral market in Europe where they go above a certain harmony during within the European Union. So this is a demand that we have, and it's very real. And when we think about all the what the cost of production, they have they have to stop signing those free market and agreement, because we really need to relocate. Okay, that is all on this point. My third point is really with the climate change, because the worry that we have in agriculture, we are very worried with the climate change, because there's different reasons for that. Sometimes we don't have enough irrigation. We don't have access to water sometimes in order to irrigate our fields. And this is part of the tension that we live. And there's other crises, a sanitary crisis in agriculture. And we had the mad cow disease, and this really impacted our agriculture, and there's others as well. But we know that it is linked to climate change. So there it is. When we look at all of those crises together, it really generates a certain global schizophrenia on the agriculture world. And lastly, what I would like to talk about, but I think it's really fundamental, is how we lose a lot of agriculture. There is a lowering in the rate of agriculture in the field. A lot of them just close shop. And this is a topic that is really difficult in the agricultural world. The politics that and policies that are in place really encouraged to get bigger. But in order for us to get out of it, you have to increase your farm, increase the size of your farm, lower your cost of production, buy more machinery. But this is like the serpent biting its own tail, because you try to increase the productivity in the work, but you cannot have more revenue. And when you have to get into that system, then you have to eat your neighbor. And this system really does not work. Excuse me, I'm really speaking fast. And when we see at the end of the baton, we have the consumers. Like when we think about France, we are the sixth in line as far as power in the world. You have the consumer that now has to make a choice between feeding itself safely. And we can see all those policies and politics that have been in place are really like next to, we're not on point. And we can see that everything that's been put in place is really to cater the big agroeconomy and the big agriculture. And all those measures that have been simplified for the common agriculture, but it does not answer the problems in place. It does not answer the problematics of the international market. it did not help with the common agriculture in Europe. And actually, we can say that lately they've tried to add. On one side, they try to, with very low income and low, pardon me, it's going a little too fast. So effectively, what we are trying to say is that the choice should not be done between the revenue for agriculture and the condition, the environment condition that are in place. We should really effectively put in place all those mobilization and partner between the social societies, the organization that are for environment, with the consumers. We have to give a new perspective to the agriculture world, and in order for us to be able to see what the revenue can be, the market can be, and this will go through treaties, and in order to be able to, and then to approach the amount of agriculture also that are part of this whole campaign. We need to have some young blood that comes in the market as well. We also have to give the tools for the agriculture in order to be those transitions that are indispensable, because we know we have a climate change that is threatening. So us, agriculture, if we want to continue to produce food, if we want to continue to produce food for the years to come, we have to be able to conserve our ways of producing. We have to conserve the earth, the growth, the ground. And we have politics, agricultural politics that do not encourage all of that. So this is the situation that we are in. And we have election in France in 15 days, and European elections also coming, and the conditions are not really good, especially on those topics. But all the work that we do locally in order to make agriculture become a topic, well, it won't be enough. We need to have change in politics. There's a need for a reform. And the risk, I believe, is that we are heading towards like a rabbit hole, a vicious cycle with the climate change. It's the worsening of the inequalities and the climate change, and also the demand of the population, which encourage, following all of this, politics that just don't work, that go opposite to those challenges that we are faced with. So this is this vicious cycle that we have to break. And this is what we're trying to do in France and in other countries also, is to create those alliances between the agricultural world and the social societies in order to create pressure for the politics in the European Union and at the international level as well. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mathieu, for that overview of, as you say, these tensions between the setup of a food system that is driving increasing forces of scale, and a food system that we need to nourish ourselves and the planet. And the two are, as you say, in a schizophrenic tension. So what we need is to resolve this schizophrenia. And we're going to do that on this call, or at least we're going to begin. Now, before taking on the many questions that all of you have generated, we should use this opportunity, as Florent suggested, to have a short dialogue between all of you to see, to see if you've got questions for one another. Javier, I wonder if I can invite you to reflect on what you've heard Florent and Mathieu share, and ask questions, or just perhaps if you can give us briefly your response. We have about half an hour remaining for us. We have a few questions, but if you would like to engage with one another, let's set aside 10 minutes or so now to do that. So Javier, the word is yours.
Yes, can you repeat what you want us to do now, to reflect on what we have heard?
If you could, Javier, reflect on what you've been hearing from France, and if that sounds familiar, or whether you would like to ask questions of our comrades, now would be a good time.
I think that the interventions that I've heard, they complement each other perfectly, because this has been a very strong conductive string. If in one side we have decades of one model of production that's more sustainable, where one part of the producers went down one path that was more deep, more of organic agriculture, more for production for communities, for local markets, more seeing the politics and the policies on all levels of administration, right? Because we're talking about the European Parliament and a commission that is not democratic. It is not democratic. And we have the lobbies. The second place, we have the European Parliament that does not have the capacity to legislate, don't have the capacity to legislate. They propose laws for the European Union. And then we have the governments, and we have all of the regions and all the municipalities, and in all levels where the struggle for this food sovereignty, we have the opportunity to advance, to face these things. We could say a good connection and alliances in local communities or regional communities. So these productions of grains or fruits or meat could have the opportunity to have these markets. And that's one example. But in general lines, the majority of products are going into markets for the state, for the European Union, and these goes to exports. And there we have the question that Florent was putting down is, of course, we want all the environmental norms, but talking about production costs is impossible. It's impossible because we have to close them. And the comrade said this, if society isn't alongside to push a guarantee of prices with a guarantee of rent, this possibility is left in small spaces and in small niche parts of the world. But in order for this to be an opportunity to incorporate men, women, diversity, from differences of territories, from different situations, diversity of gender, etc., in order to confront this together, from what I can see, they're in that struggle, Elena, despite those differences that are key. We understand this about food sovereignty. And in Europe, we had forgotten many times, because we were called as if we were from another planet when we talked about the regulation markets. When we would confront these free market treaties with the United States, with Canada, when always the same people winning, always the same, and the same always lose. And it's the small producers who lose. And always in all places where they disappear. And that model is confronting like Mathieu had said, we also face that mental paradigm where in all aspects of society, how is it possible that what I in 40 years had never lived, which is 3 weeks, these finance funds are able to form a campaign in the entire Spanish state over WhatsApp, mobilizing young people through WhatsApp, with the best, most beast, most brutal arguments, most angry, most like as if there was a movie from like a war movie, insulting, and the young people who get on the tractors. And in the middle of these mobilizations, we also have our people. And I think Mathieu or Florent said this, but this reflection that we're putting on the table, the need for this type of dialogue, the need to know that we're not alone, despite differences that lead us to believe so, that we have similarities on which to strengthen. And speaking about coming from food sovereignty from the local to the food sovereignty of the global, it's a struggle, it's a global struggle. And these mobilizations have also served to bring forward the term of globalization, the topic of globalization. But this is something that's very difficult because for the last 100, and I'm going to try to say it with the most respect, because I'm going to put other examples that aren't from the United States. Bolsonaro, Milei, also El Pen in Spain, El Pen in France, Germans, they all of a sudden appear as the defenders of the most poor. They come out as the defenders of the most marginalized. And they can capture the attention and confront and face all of the work from universities, from the great alliances, to the people who are committed, from ourselves. How do we face that balance that's being used by bots in Facebook and with this capacity, this incredibly impressive capacity? How do we face that? How do we ask young people, what do we do? What's the method of communication that we have to employ? If through WhatsApp, when it takes us a month to organize a mobilization, and for them like that, and they just boom, and they put a post, or they put 100 tractors on a road. And those are the reflections that have me thinking about reflections from the comrades. And the work continues, and solidarity and cooperation are key.
Javier, thank you so much for that reflection. I want to offer Mathieu and Florent a chance to respond, but we've also got a lot of questions, including, including one of my own. What I'm hearing is that there is a crisis of profitability driven by these free trade agreements and driven by the forces of industrial agriculture and by finance. And that faces farmers across the European Union. Sustainable members of La Via Campesina want to transition to agroecological farming and want to take on the challenge of climate change, and it's going to be expensive, and society should pay for that. And in this fiscal crisis, there is a moment of hijack from the right, where the right is saying, look, we'll still take your subsidies, but we want to make this appear as if this is, as Javier was saying, the people versus some environmentalists in cities. So we've got this very lucrative schizophrenia, right? The schizophrenia doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. So on the one hand, we have our preferred policies for sustainable family farms. And I was hearing a little bit about the supply chain policy that Javier mentioned. But there are also sustainable policies that Mathieu and Florent were discussing. And then there's the policies of the far right, hijacking and maintaining monopolies, hijacking the agenda, maintaining monopolies. And this is, the tension that I hear Javier wrestling with is, well, how are they able to do this? How are they able to hijack our agenda when we've been working on it for so long? And I would very much welcome reflections, particularly Florent, Mathieu, on how it is that this moment is something nonetheless that we can build on through international solidarity, that we can figure out how to fight back. We also have some other questions, so I'm going to let the translators catch up for a second. We have some other questions that are fairly basic around the context of the European Union. For many of us, the idea of a single market is a little confusing. So it's a single market with many players and many supply chains. So the questions that we've got are, well, is there a single price, or are people looking at the Chicago Board of Trade? Are there severely different kinds of experiences of climate change from Northern Europe to Southern Europe? We've also got questions about what exactly is going on with the Netherlands and the representation of the politics of anti-pollution versus pork farming there. So lots of questions for you. You don't have to answer them all, but it would be terrific if maybe I pass the floor over to Florent and then to Mathieu to reflect a little bit on any and all of this that seems interesting. So Florent, why don't you start?
Yeah, we would probably need 3 or more hours to answer all of these. I think I have one question for Javier, which is one hope that we have is that among the population here, we did win something, which is farmers have a low income, and this is not acceptable, especially if we expect so much things from them, including environmental transition. So my question to Javier, and then I'll continue on the others. Is this one? Is it also the case in Spain that basically you feel the population through that crisis is more aware of the fact that farmers have a low income and is not accepting the fact that farmers have low income, especially since they're expecting more for farmers on environmental issues? Maybe Javier can answer to that after, but what I feel especially is that we did win that interpretation. Far right, of course, in our country like in others, did take the control. Big unions did take the control in 2 weeks by putting many tractors on the roundabouts and then the highways. And this is very difficult for our movement to accept that, because we're working for years, and we, like 4 or 5 years ago, we had huge climate march in the streets. We had youth really at the heart of environmental fights, together with farmers and together with many other NGOs and associations. And we're living a very difficult moment now, as you were saying, Raj, which is this is less. This we don't see that very much now. We see a huge movement. We see the far right, but I feel that this is temporary, and that we did win the understanding that farmers need an income. And we also saw, and Mathieu was talking about it a bit later, that our campaigns, maybe they're old-fashioned. We're doing we're trying to compete with huge farmers by putting 3 tractors in the street while they're putting thousands of tractors in the streets. We're trying to compete with them while you know, they can be 5,000 in one highway, and we can be 100 on one roundabout. But our strength is the partnership that we have with people, if we're in a position to really educate people on how to convert their needs, their demand for environmental transition in partnership with us rather than in opposition. And what we did during the last 2 to 3 months is one or two protests, which were not, which in which farmers, agroecological farmers, CSA farmers were definitely not alone. We did team up with many different organizations, from environmental organizations to labor unions. Yesterday we were with labor unions in a big rally against far right, while we did link the demands for social rights with the demand for income for farmers and environmental transformation. And for us, these alliances, which are bringing us out of the farming world, which in which we give hand to people in the society, much more in the organized civil society, is key. The biggest rally we organized during the movements in our region was in Paris, where we had many people on a famous square, and we were 200 farmers, but there were 2,000 people from the society, the general public, and especially many young people from youth organization who were really helping us in giving a completely different image to our fight. So I think one of the options for us is definitely to partner with organizations which are really far from the farming world. And when we did talk to these people who are different from our usual colleagues, we feel that they have enormous expectation on us, and they have also an enormous amount of time that they could dedicate to help us pushing this agenda on an income for farmer in order to realize environmental transformation.
Fantastic, Florent. Thank you. Mathieu, I'd like to give you the floor to respond and reflect to some of this.
One of the elements that I see is changing. I think that the cultural battle that we see on the market, it's changing a little, it's shifting a little bit. The commercial exchange, and where we're going to be dealing with the international market, and we can think that it would leave some space in order to be able to rework the marketplace and the prices. How do we have the big agro corporation? We couldn't even talk about it a few years ago, but nowadays we can talk about it. Those are questions that we can now talk about, so we can see that this is something that changes now. That means that it becomes really complicated when we talk about the global organization for commerce. We need to reinvent a different way to exchange between the nations, and all that work that has been done by our predecessors, and all the movement for the farmers and international agriculture, we can see the fruits of their labor now. What we need to do really is to stop the extreme right. They're just flourishing, and we need to stop them. And clearly, it's a question of survival, not just the organization, the agriculture organization, but it is for everyone if the extreme right takes the power. This is a case of survival, and the pressure that we need the long term. There is a lot of public funds that are being pushed in the agricultural sector. But we need to be able to regulate the market a little bit better, because when we look at this public fund, unfortunately, it doesn't support very well this sector. We need to reorient it to a transition that we want to be accompanied. When we look at all the challenges that we have in front of us, we need to, one, regulate the market better, and then we can reorient the productivity in order to accompany the different sectors that we need. And then, how do we do? I'm convinced that the agricultural organizations that are in place right now have to reinforce, they have to be able to organize ourselves and use the new social media and network in order for, we have to do it via organization, via the collective. We have to continue this work that we are doing in our organization right now in order to accompany the youth. There's a lot of young people that want to hope to be farmers, but we have to be there and continue to be there to share with them and share the land. I mean, because in order to be a farmer, you have to have land. You have to have a little piece of a parcel of land. So we have to be able to know how to share it equitably. And we have to continue this. Like Campesina in Europe, we have to give ourselves a new perspective. And I believe that the farmers organization at a local or international, national, we have to have, those are tools that are very strong. Even if it's difficult for us to see it right now, but we do notice that the strength of those movements, will see it long term. And of course, with social societies and the partnership that we can have with ONG and other community, there are certain organizations that have different agendas than ours, but we still need to increase our capacity in order to be able to work together. And I think that the challenge that we are faced with, it is still in a big challenge. And it's been years that we've been building with other countries in the world, but the answer has to stay the same for us. We have to continue to fight, pardon me, because this answer has to convert into public politics and for the millions and billions of farmers throughout the world.
Thank you so much, Mathieu. Frustratingly, we're coming to the end of our time together, and everyone wants to know the vision and the journey that your organizations propose from here to an ecological future that in which farmers are being being supported in the transition away from industrial farming towards agroecology. There is no way in the 1 minute each that you have left that we can learn that from you. But what I'm hoping you might be able to do is point us to areas where we can look for your organization's future vision. Javier, you have a specific question from Florent addressed to you, and whether you might be able to give us some closing thoughts and ways that we can continue to engage in this conversation. So Javier, 1 minute, unfortunately. 1 minuto. Solo.
1 minute. Okay, well, Florent's question, maybe it will be for another day. I could take a whole afternoon and in eating and drinking some good wine, some good beer, artisanal if possible, local. But I think the key here is in the construction of a collective conscience and moving from that individualism in which these big big, large industries finance these extreme right groups, and they capture because they have studied to the millimeter, they have scanned to the millimeter the population to then activate on social media, on Facebook. We can't just with goodwill, our 40 years of experience of Via Campesina, we have to come to the ground and say, and reconstruct schools of thought and schools of knowledge, schools of communication in which young people who are in these mobilizations, they've come out with huge consciousness because not all of them have gone to go vote for the extreme right. With them, we can see, how does it have to be? Because we distrust political organization, political action happening in WhatsApp and Instagram, but these are invaluable in the ways that we construct our tools and our methods of education and of information. And the last point, in the alliances, we'd have to say to the colleagues the following question. We want to go faster, we can go in small groups. We want to go faster, we can go small groups, we'd go far, and we can go and work with different NGOs, environmental NGOs that don't have any interest working against free trade agreements. They don't have anything to say about prices. And to be able to grow and build that solidarity of families, of indigenous family solidarity, indigenous solidarity, and build all of these common elements that allow us to leave clearly that we need to have a social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and an economic sustainability. Because otherwise, if we don't have all three legs, it's not possible. But I insist on the first question. If in confronting the dominant language, there is a dominant language, a dominant discourse that's favored in these corporations and these communications. We have to come to the ground and grow and strengthen our reds, our networks, our alliances with the ideas, with clear ideas. I think that's key. Something we have to do in the next few months in order to face and come out of this frustration of hate and violence that are amplifying these issues, that are nourishing and feeding the manipulation of the marginalized people through hate and violence. And we say no. From the construction of communities, from the construction of care, from the construction of comprehension, what our realities are in all senses. Sorry, I passed my time.
Just a little, Javier. So thank you so much for that rousing and inspirational close. I don't know whether Florent or Mathieu, in the 30 seconds we have left, you have any other remarks you would like to share?
I can share two things in so 15 seconds per thing. The first one is it might be difficult from the other side of the Atlantic to understand that, but we are different countries with different cultures. But it is very interesting what we experienced in this spring, because we did experience the same thing with the same anger in different countries, among farmers and among the society. And so for us, it brings us to a public debate at European level, which is extremely important, because that can lead us to political transformation also at European level. At this time, far right took the control because we were prepared. And I think we should get more prepared. We should put our fights much more at European level, because this is where it takes place. And one very important thing, if we want to have the society with us, is that we need in our fights to have access to food. We cannot actually be promoting a system which is only for a minority of people. We should promote a system which embraces everybody, and therefore we should, in our demands, find ways to make sure that what we will propose as food products is going to be affordable for people, not with farmers that have no income, but with public policies that make sure that what is coming out of our farm is of good quality and is affordable for people. So we need people with us to make these transformations, and for that we need to address access to food at European level.
Fantastic, Florent. Thank you for your brevity and for your inspiration. Mathieu, the final words are for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. What I think we are noticing, and we are witness to an inequality gap that is widening between the farmers and the big agriculture. And when we look at the climate, it is going too fast.
So Mathieu, you're going a little too fast, sorry.
I'm trying to go fast so that I can close out. So what I am trying to say is that we need to organize ourselves to work together, that it is national or the whole Europe. We need to win this fight. I'm convinced that we will win.
Mathieu, thank you so much. Many apologies for running out of time, but deep thanks to Javier, Florent, and Mathieu for just a fantastically enlightening moment of analysis and hope, ultimately, for the solidarity that we can build, not just within our countries, but across them. I'd like now to hand over to Marlene Rojas, who will close us out, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Goodbye. Goodbye. It was a pleasure. Good morning. Good evening. Very briefly, my name is Marlene Rojas. I'm a member of the board of directors for the Defenders of Family Farm Defenders in Wisconsin. And I'm a part of the farm workers movement, the landless workers movement, since maybe like 20 years ago, but really since I've been born. And well, we've heard many things, right? We've heard lots of emotions and inspiring words from Javier and Mathieu and all of our colleagues and Florent. We know that all of the farm workers from India to Europe out in the streets to demand economic justice. And the agriculture workers and the mobilizations and the protests, they have shown us courage and hope. So the question is, what can we do with their teachings? And what can we do with their courage? The question is, if in the United States, we'll have protests that are similar. And what can we do to create a system, agroecological system that is more just around the world? We want to also say that here in Family Farm Defenders, we want to have a conversation in person. We want Javier and Florent and Mathieu to come here and be with us to talk and discuss these topics, because it's not the same to be on the computer than to be able to have a tea, have a drink with Mathieu, Florent, and Javier. So we're very open to this type of collaboration and continue working on these topics. And I also want to say that if you would like to If you would like to join the next strike or be informed, please join or follow the web page of National Family Farm Coalition, nffc.net, La Via Campesina, Disparity to Parity, and many other groups that are part of this struggle. Thank you so much for such inspiring conversations, and thank you so much to everybody who organized this webinar, and thank you so much to our moderator, Raj, for such a beautiful moderation which you gave us. And truly, thank you for all the inspiration in this morning, evening, afternoon. Thank you so much.